He sheds a tear and suddenly he's too sensitive.
But what if she holds it together? She's cold, heartless. Where are your emotions?
It's like society handed out a rule book for crying and forgot to run it by literally anyone with feelings. See,
Let's talk about why gender's still policing our tear ducts.
why are men shamed for showing emotion, but women are judged if they don't have those emotions? A, what is your take on this?
This is honestly one of the biggest reasons I am so grateful to have been socialized as a woman before coming out as a trans man. Because it taught me to be more intuitive. It taught me to handle my emotions in a way that feels authentic to me. And I believe if I was socialized and raised as a man, I wouldn't have that experience to take into me as I transition into a trans man at this time in my life. So for this topic, I feel like this is one of those reasons I'm grateful to have been a woman. It's just such a real thing that we experience in the world. You see it everywhere. I see it even in my daughter right now as she's growing up through childhood and going to school. The boys aren't supposed to cry. And like, she's only 5 years old. Those things are already being set in stone. The boys don't cry. They don't have emotions. They're supposed to be strong. They play. But girls, on the other hand, we can cry. We can talk to our friends. We can do all these things. What's your take on it?
I was very blessed that I came up in a household that no one ever told me that I couldn't cry, when I was living as a
That's
boy.
good.
I was an emotional kid and I didn't have anybody telling me that you can't be. Now let's go back and say that didn't mean that I did not experience a lot of trouble because of it.
Mm.
People called me gay because I was very emotional and reactive and all of those things. But I was never told by anyone in my family. Also, it wasn't like we didn't say boys don't cry or any of those things. But I think it's important to go back and look at that. While I was allowed to be emotional, it's still very different. There is a different component when you talk about hormones within this, right? I've always been a person who cried when it came to movies, when it came to anything. Honestly, I've never really felt shame about it, which is kind of amazing. But maybe that's also how I was raised.
That's beautiful. I truly believe that more boys and men should be raised like that.
They really should be. Uh,
I would love for you, Jen, to touch on the societal and cultural and social aspect of you being more in tune with your emotions, what you experience in that way. Your household raising you this way on one side, but culture's telling you something on the other side. What was that?
it was confusing. Men were not being able to express their emotions, and it made me different that I was. And everyone was looking at me like I was an outsider because I was able to cry. I was doing the things that the boys weren't. And that pressure was challenging. And luckily, I guess in a lot of ways, I was okay with who I was. And eventually, I became okay with being alone a lot. I was bullied. And then eventually, it was, I don't need to be part of that. And I'm okay staying home and alone. But I wasn't part of the groups because I was emotional.
So
And
I feel like that takes it to a whole nother level of this conversation. The topic is why do men get judged for crying, but why do men get ostracized for crying? Why do they get bullied for crying?
right, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
There's no other easy way to say it. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous that men are not allowed to cry and not supposed to show emotion and all of it. I always heard people say that I'm not supposed to cry or that, oh, I have this man said, I only cried once in my lifetime or whatever. And I'm like, that's really, really sad that you've only cried at a specific time. I have cried thousands of times in my life, and I'm great with it. Honestly, my emotions are very different now than they were before I started transition. When I began my transition, it became really different. It became about being more in tune with my emotions and being more vulnerable with myself. I cry at very different things now, and I've really had to open my mind up to allow those feelings to flow. And honestly, it makes me feel more beautiful. And it makes me feel beautiful. In some ways, it's like the woman I am, right? But that's also society telling me that because now I'm a woman, right? And presenting as a woman. So I'm thinking, well, I'm okay with this now and I embrace myself and I feel more womanly because of this. But that's all crap. Why should I feel more womanly because I'm expressing and feeling emotion? Like that Just sitting here talking about this with you is a revelation for me, and that is a fallacy. And
That has come full circle for you. Because in the trans man world, we experience it opposite. We start to take testosterone, and I think our emotions have very little to do with our hormones and the way we experience them because we all have the full spectrum and fluidity of our emotional experience. Men, women, emotional experience, universal. So when a trans man transition, well, this is a topic I'd love to bring because I actually talk about this with a lot of trans men, and what it's come down to when I talk to them is this is a part of the journey we don't want to talk about because we want the world to know that we're happy with ourselves in this journey and this choice that we've made. But in the beginning of a trans man transition, the doctor average dose that they're prescribing you is zero point 0.5 testosterone weekly. Your body is not used to that amount of testosterone. And no, men don't rage more and they're not angry more. But when your body is transitioning to getting to normal testosterone levels and you're starting to put testosterone in you at that much of a level, you do start to get angry. You do start to rage. And it takes you such a long time in your transition to understand your emotional experience on a different way. But it's not because men are more angry, it's because the amount of testosterone, it just wasn't solidified yet and they just weren't used to it in their body. So that's why I say it takes time. It could take a year, 2 years for you to really understand and come to your normal testosterone levels that you need to come down to. So it's a really interesting process. And then with the whole societal thing, me transitioning right now, I have to remind myself daily to stay in tune with my emotions, to have these conversations with my wife, to sit down and get down to my daughter's level and say, no, honey, everything's going to be okay when she's having a moment. Those are things that are really important to me as a human. And I'm constantly having to remind myself as I'm transitioning into a man that I want to carry those things with me. I do not want to leave those things behind. So it's a very interesting process, especially doing it for a second time and being able to be more mindful and conscious with what's happening. I believe this topic, I don't know what your take is on it, but I do believe this one is societal conditioning. I don't think this one comes a lot from our biology.
I would agree with you pretty much completely. I think I just said it there, right? When I'm really shocking myself, thinking, well, that's a fallacy. That's crap that I'm feeling more womanly because of feeling more emotions. And yes, I do tap into my emotions more through the hormones in my body. There's nothing wrong or unnatural about that. But the conditioning that we have where women are supposed to feel and men are not, that is complete society. And I want to go back to what you said. When you began transition, things started changing with you because of all the high testosterone in your body. How did that change for you within those emotions as well?
Oh, I fucking ended up hating the world. After 6 to 8 months on my transition, I'm not a naturally inclined angry person, but everybody around me was telling me that I was just turning into this angry person. That was one of the reasons and one of the things that I was thinking about when I decided to detransition. It was my mom was like, "You've just turned into this angry person. I've never seen you this way." And when I talked to other trans men about their experience, I had just talking to this two-spirited guy this week, and we were talking about this, and he said the same thing happened to him, and that is why he also had chosen to go off of testosterone for some time and then come back to it in a more of a conscious way and more of a hormonal balance way. But it completely took it just felt like I didn't have emotions anymore. It was interesting because as somebody who is female at birth and has natural estrogen pumping through my body, I just don't think our bodies are ready for that. Even though it is aligned with my soul and my expression and all of that, there's a way to do it that makes sense for the human body and overall well-being, and then there's a way to do it that you're just being prescribed and you're just following a path. But if they could take a step back in how they're prescribing these things or doing the things in society and inside the system and the medical system, I think that a lot of trans men don't have to experience that rage time. I think it's a really big decision to say, I need to take a step back from this hormone to understand what this journey really means, because the hormone starts to take over the journey almost instead of you leading the journey. And when you let the hormone take over the journey as well, you're letting the narrative that society has pinpointed onto the trans community as well. You must do it this way, and there's no other way. So a lot of trans people and a lot of trans men are like, you know what, I just have to go through this. And they don't even think that they could take a step back from hormones, because that is worse to some trans people than being on hormones and having to go through that. So it's an interesting thing. Testosterone definitely fucks with your emotions, and it doesn't have to, because I do believe even that simple societal saying of girls have easier access to their emotions. No, they don't. We all have the same access to our emotions, and they all hold a lot of power when we actually access them and treat them and regulate them healthily, and not in a stoic, in a way that feels aligned and actually makes us feel lighter instead of heavier in our emotions.
I could
So
feel the
that's why it's so
passion in your
important.
voice about this. And is this something that you believe that all trans men experience because of the high testosterone? So
Hmm.
honestly, let's go back. That says something about all of the biology within this as well, is that there is biology, as we would say, there's a mix between just about everything we're talking about. There is biology within expressing emotions. And you've pointed it right there. And some men have higher testosterone and some men don't. But testosterone is a very powerful thing. That's why it's even regulated for you. Estrogen is not for me. And estrogen is very different for trans people across the spectrum, right? I've been blessed that I can tap into my feelings better than I ever have, but I also don't have these moments where I have heard of trans women who have experienced just crying out of nowhere for no reason. And I think that can be just a womanly thing in general or whatever that is, but that doesn't validate anybody or any of it. But I think even then, maybe it's a point where maybe if you're experiencing that too much, then maybe you would need to drop back a little bit. But I understand your point, A, of that people are like, well, I just have to go through this because I need to. Well, I can understand some of that because the idea of me going off of estrogen right now makes my heart pound and it gives me anxiety. And I'm doing a lot of things to prepare that if that ever stops in my country, then I'm prepared and I'm not ever going to stop my estrogen because that is not a way that I'm going to live my life. And so there is a power that it can take over you, but there is a powerful thing about how those drugs do make us feel like how we want to feel and help with our identity. You are one of the few people that probably ever detransitioned and came back. And I think it's freaking beautiful. And you have so much to add to this world because of it. But
Thank
that's
you.
not something that most people can do. So, such an
Definitely.
interesting topic.
I will say, being in a position, circumstances right now where I don't have access to hormones, I would like to. I can't just go in and do it like people do, because I'm an immigrant in a country right now. So, because of this experience that I've been forced into and coming out as a trans man, I sit and question, why did I come out at this time in my life when I don't have,
Tell
like,
everybody
when I
what country you're in, by the way.
I'm in Canada. Bless. Thank you, Lord, heaven above, divine, whoever's out there. Thank you for this beautiful country that I'm in. I actually love to talk about it, but back in the States, I would not want to talk about it. I am originally from the States. So, being an immigrant inside of Canada and just having to be patient with the immigration process, it's put a whole new spin on my transgender experience. I've been forced to slow down. I've been forced to ask myself harder questions. I've been forced to accept myself at deeper levels. I've been forced to heal. There's no better option. I'd rather figure out a way to be at peace with myself than beat myself up and be in chaos every single day. I'm here for a reason, and I believe that, and this time has really showed me what that reason is. And when I have full access to hormones and things like that, I'm ready for it. I couldn't be more excited, but I'm also trusting in the divine timing with that. But nonetheless, it's just taught me some really big things that I wouldn't have known. If I had access to hormones right now, I'd be on that shit right now. If I could go get top surgery this year, I'd be on that shit right now. But it's not an option for me, truly, in my reality. So I'm just letting it be.
It's really shocking that you are not on hormones right now. because maybe it's the how long did you do hormones the first time?
Eight
Testosterone.
months.
8 months of
Yeah, eight
testosterone.
months. Hmm.
8 months of testosterone really masculinized you, I will say for sure. Because
Yes, it
everything about
definitely
you, including
did.
your voice, is very masculine, in my opinion.
Mhm. And I have been like since I've come out again, I've been like naturally raising my testosterone levels and things like that and doing things that I can in my power and my control
Hmm.
and choosing to focus on that stuff more. So I think doing the natural testosterone levels for right now has keeping my voice a little bit in that way because it does get sore from time to time more than it was before when I wasn't focusing on raising my testosterone levels. But the first transition, that was one of the permanent changes that I was stuck with, was this voice. But when I got off of testosterone the first time, it was so much deeper. But the the longer I was off testosterone, the more I got a little bit higher, and then it just came to this pretty level voice at where it is right now. And I'm grateful because the voice that I always wanted. So it was like that permanent change. I was like, I'm okay with that.
That's so interesting. And quick thing, I'm going to pop in real fast and say trans men have that blessing that testosterone does masculinize their voice. Trans women, we do all of that work ourselves unless we have surgery. And so
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work and I'm always doing more work. And that's something that is important to me.
And you have such a beautiful voice, Jen. I
Thank
truly
you.
mean that.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. I want to go back because we've talked a lot about how men not expressing emotions, but let's go back at least briefly to talk about how women are judged if they don't. And this is something that I think you probably are better at explaining it or talking about from your experiences, whether it's yours or other women in your life.
That is an interesting question because, we've mentioned on like previous episodes, even though I was raised and socialized as a woman and assigned a birth at woman, I was a very masculine woman. So cutting my hair and all that stuff at an early age and being a masculine lesbian, I did have an interesting experience with my emotions as well because it's not that I would like, go and like always have somewhere to share my emotions because it didn't feel like the typical woman, the typical girls group at school or the typical girls group at soccer. I didn't feel like these girls could understand what I was going through because I was gay and I felt different in my identity inside. So even though I was more in tune with my emotions and spent the time feeling them, it was more in my room. It was more with myself. And it was more when I could find those safe spaces with like my best friend Matt growing up. He was a safe space for me. My mom was a safe space for me as well. But other than that, I feel like I've just the socialization of emotions in women, it's just allowed me to grow up and not shame myself for experiencing them. But I can't say that I could go to a group and always express that because I just didn't align with the average girl
I think
that was
some of these
inside it.
topics like this, I think you and I need to bring back some guests eventually that will be able to talk about some of these things that have experienced some harder
Hmm.
realities, like men that were told you can't be this way, and then women that were really felt like they just weren't crying and people were criticizing them for it. So I think these are great topics that I think we will come back to again later. But
Hmm.
while crying is human, it's not gendered. Let's make that very clear. And everyone should feel like that they are free to experience your emotions. And honestly, it takes a lot of self love and it takes a lot of understanding yourself and a lot of not giving a shit what other people think,
Amen.
because which is really hard to do.
Hmm.
But when you put in the work, it's really beautiful that you can actually express your emotions and feel it. This is something that I feel passionate about, and I know Ada is too. Why do we judge people for how they feel instead of what they feel? If you have experienced something very differently than A or I have experienced, please leave us a message on our SpeakPipe link that is in the show notes. If you are interested in being a guest on the show to talk about your very different experience, we would love to have you. Please reach out and let's continue the conversation. We have all of our socials here in the show notes as well. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you comment. Let's create the conversation. Let's keep it going.
And remember, we want all of you, our listeners, to be a part of this conversation with us. This isn't a podcast for A and Jen to just dissect our experiences. This is to bring all of you into a bigger conversation and start seeing gender in a new way together with having you all involved. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to send those messages and leave those messages in our SpeakPipe link. And like Jen said, if you want to be a guest on the show, and if you have experienced a gender role in your life where it's been performative and maybe you've questioned it, or whatever the case might be, or if you're questioning it just listening to this podcast alone, please reach out to us. We would love to start having guests on this show.
And tune in next week. By the way, it is Talkin Sexes Tuesday. We always post our episodes on Tuesday at 12:22 Central Time. And our next topic is, why do women say they want a nice guy, but then find him boring? We're going to talk about bad boys and why women like him. It's going to be a real fun topic. Join us next week.